I'm literally looking at myself at the moment.
Time is unfaithful for those
Teacher,
who
I'm
abuse
literally
it.
looking at myself at the moment.
Time is unfaithful for
Teacher,
those who
I'm
abuse
literally
it.
looking at myself at the
The
moment.
lotto is not gambling. The lotto is a tradition. It's an Italian tradition.
Teacher,
Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of It's Time to Rewind, the podcast trapped in its own time loop right along with the movies we discuss. This is the second of two special hiatus episodes discussing Harry and Hermione's second time through the ending of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, that starts at 100 minutes and 41 seconds with Hermione and Harry going back in time via the time turner, and ends at 126 minutes and 30 seconds with Dumbledore feigning ignorance and wishing them goodnight. And once again, this time is taken off of the extended edition currently streaming on Peacock, though I don't think there are any additional scenes that take place in this section of the movie. And joining me today is Gary Roby from Harry Potter Minute. How are you doing today?
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you on.
I'm so excited to talk about this movie because for folks who did listen to Harry Potter Minute will know that that show has not continued since the end of Chamber of Secrets, mostly due to a lot of J.K. Rowling discussion that we just didn't want to have.
Yeah.
But this is maybe one of my favorite movies of the series, and so I'm so hyped to talk about it today.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because this one tends to get a bit of a mixed reaction. I think I feel like fans of the movies, this tends to be their favorites, and fans of the books, this tends to be their least favorite.
I can see that. It feels so different than the ones that come before it because we have a new director on set and the costuming's not doing that. All the kids aren't in the robes the whole movie the way they were before, and so the tone is different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has a weird tone because I know that we do have a bit of darkness, mainly towards the end, I think, of the first two movies. Mm-hmm. And this one has it a bit more scattered throughout, but then there's also these moments of just slapstick comedy sprinkled throughout. So it really has kind of up and down with the tone throughout this entire movie.
Feels like they were trying to find a balance and couldn't quite get there, but I still enjoy it.
Yeah, although I don't think there's too much comedy in this section that we're going to be talking about. I think just a couple moments, and I think, we'll get to them whenever we go through the scene. I do think that those are my least favorite moments of this section of the movie. But, you mentioned Harry Potter Minute, and, you can, if you want, you can talk a little bit about that now, but, I did want to ask you, what is your overall background with the Harry Potter series and books?
Oh, goodness. I was given Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone for Christmas when I was 7 or 8, and just devoured that book. I fell in love immediately. Was able to go and pick up the hardcover of Chamber of Secrets right when it came out. We were sort of, my whole family really on board with the franchise, did the midnight releases and that whole thing.
Oh, nice.
And at the time, I feel like as a kid, being a reader is something that you're able to kind of squeeze in time to get through books at the end of class or on the bus or wherever. I was always reading. And so I would reread the whole series every time a new book came out.
Yeah, I was the same way. I'm a fast reader, and I remember, especially in high school, they would give us, time to work on homework in class, and I would usually finish the homework really quickly, and then I would have time, and so I would read. And my biggest thing was the Forgotten Realms books and the Wheel of Time.
Oh my gosh, the Wheel of Time. I still need to go back and read those last couple books in that series, but that's another one where that's a chore at this point.
Yeah, I haven't gone back. I think I made it through book 10 or 11.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's usually where people fall off, because that's when Robert Jordan actually passed, and then there was a significant delay before Sanderson picked up the last 3.
Yeah.
I don't remember enough of it, and people are like, oh, just go read the summaries on Wikipedia or whatever, but that's not satisfying to me either.
Yeah, although I do like the the Amazon series. I think
Yeah, that first season was pretty good.
Yeah, I think I was at a perfect headspace for it because I had read the books, so whenever stuff happened, it would be like, oh yeah, that definitely rings a bell. But I didn't have it so much in my head, so whenever they did something different, I was like, that's not how it is in the books.
Yeah, right. And so, like, to bring it back to Harry Potter, I definitely remember being that kind of pretentious kid when the movies came out and be like, well, this is different. I don't like they changed that. And, like, I've let go of all of that at this point because I've seen the movies now way more, I think, than I've actually read the books. And it's been a long time since I've read through them. And then, yeah, like, when the Movies by Minutes thing first started really, like, blowing up, I reached out to Scott Corelli over at Julian Genre and was like, hey, like, I've been thinking about doing this Harry Potter show with my friend. And, we did 2 seasons of that. And then my laptop that I was working on at the time had died. And then the pandemic happened. And then J.K. Rowling stuff happened. And we've just never gotten back to it. Like, I don't know at this point if that's something that we are interested in doing in the future or not. Just because suddenly there's like a lot of extra baggage that I feel like we need to work through if we're going to continue the show.
Yeah.
But I love this series. Like, it meant so much to me growing up. Like, regardless of her views in the world now, like, I think that Harry Potter made me a better person.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, there's so much good surrounding Harry Potter and the story and the mythology that it is as a whole. And I always like to think, I talked about it in the last episode too, but I think especially with the movies, J.K. Rowling is only one small part of the movies as a whole, because everybody brings their own input into it. You have the director, the writer, the all the people that worked on the costuming and all the actors, and to just completely discount the movies, that does a disservice to all of them.
No, I completely agree. And it is easy, when people talk about things like the death of the author all the time and like removing that from the conversation, but it is easy to go back and look at some of the things that are in here in the stories and be like, okay, like that is a little questionable. Like maybe I should have analyzed this a little bit harder when I was a kid. But like you do get wrapped up in the like you said, the mythology of it, and in this sort of battle for good and evil, and the Harry's descent towards like his fight with Voldemort and like everything that he's going through. I remember being an angsty teen reading Order of the Phoenix for the first time and being like, Harry, why are you such an angsty teen? Like, I don't know. I don't know if I have the wherewithal to like really pick apart all the things that there's too much. And we're not really here to talk about the series as a whole right now. So
yeah. And speaking of that, let's go ahead and dive into the scene at hand. Yeah. So this starts with Harry and Hermione using the time turner to go back in time, and I do love that this is still early in Harry's career with the magic, and I like the different reactions between Harry and Hermione as they use the time turner, and Harry is still fascinated by this new magic. Yeah. So he's like looking around and watching the after images of the people going in reverse fast motion. And Hermione is just like standing perfectly still because, she's used to using this all year. So this is, for her, this is like old hat.
Yeah. I love Harry's bewilderment here. I love her like smacking his hand away when he goes to touch it.
Yeah, I mentioned that in the last, the end of the last episode. Yeah, I love that so much. Just like, I believe what I said was, I feel like that's Hermione saying like, don't touch that. This is not something for a third year to mess with, unless that third year's name is Hermione Granger.
Yep. Got special permission and everything to use this.
And then afterwards, Hermione mentions that it's 7:30, and I still think the first thing that came to my mind, and again, that's something that I talked about a little bit last episode, is that it seems like it's early for a curfew, because, Hagrid mentions that they would be trouble being caught in his hut at that time, which I think by then I could say that it was like 8 p.m. And I was curious, and I did a little bit of digging, and most boarding schools that operate today, the most common curfew that I saw is 10 p.m.
Interesting.
Although I think you could argue that that they may have a stricter curfew this year because there is a convicted murderer on the loose.
That is very true. I definitely think that it feels early. I was also thinking about, like, I don't know what time of year this is at the end of the school year, so I guess we're pushing into summer, huh? I was like, oh, it's really surprisingly bright outside for 7:30, but that's because, like, we're recording this and it's like heading into winter.
Yeah, I kind of thought that it was spring because most of the time the story of the book and the movie takes place over the course of a school year. So when you get to the end of the movie, you're getting into spring, heading into summer.
But yeah, like I always got the impression that like the students aren't allowed outside of the building. Like I think that there's like a curfew for like when you need to be inside the castle by, and then probably a secondary like this is when you need to be in your dormitory by. Because I imagine that like the Great Hall probably is like still serving food around now, whereas like they shouldn't be out risking the chance of like going off toward the Forbidden Forest or doing just things that are outside that they're not supposed to be like messing around with.
Yeah, and they, even though the headmaster is the most powerful wizard of all time, the fact that they only have a limited number of staff to watch out for all these students who also are capable of using magic, so that just complicates everything.
Yeah.
And I do want to point out this. I feel like it's this gorgeous overhead shot of the courtyard as Harry and Hermione run out to meet up. Well, not meet up, but to look at themselves as Hermione, punching Draco.
I love her punching Draco's face. It makes me so happy every time.
And I like how Harry compliments her punch.
Yeah.
And this is where Hermione explains that McGonagall gave her the time turner in her first term of this year, just so she can get all of her lessons. And so I was thinking about this. I don't remember if it mentions in the book how many extra classes she's taking, but I'm just going to say for the sake of argument, let's say she has an extra 7 classes a week that she's doing double. Does that seem fair?
That sounds reasonable. I know, I don't remember how many classes she's taking, but I know that at least in the movie, there are a couple that are mentioned at like being at the same time, like divination and arithmancy, I think are both at the same time for her. But then we also get occasions where like Harry and Ron are like talking about something, and then suddenly Hermione is there as if she hadn't been, and they like react like, where did you come from? Which I find really interesting because of the way that this explains how time travel works in this setting. Of like, it's a fixed timeline. They shouldn't notice her sudden appearance because she was there the whole time.
Right.
But we can get deeper into like how that time travel works as we see a little bit more of this loop.
And so I'm thinking, 7 classes a week, 25 weeks in a typical class year. So that means that she spent about an extra 175 hours taking classes.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy to think about.
That is kind of crazy to think about. Does this make her, it's only 145 hours, so I guess it only comes out to a few days, but like, does that make her old? Like, she's older than she would have been.
A little bit older. I mean, it's only, 2 hours a day. I think it adds up to be, like 7, an extra week.
Yeah. Not terrible.
Yeah, not too terrible. I imagine it probably cuts into her sleep schedule a little bit because
That's what I was thinking.
She's staying up basically an extra hour or 2 a day.
Yeah. That's tough.
So they see Hermione punch Draco again, and then they go and hide. I feel like if this was a different movie, instead of jumping out the window and hiding, they would like go into a corner and pretend like they're making out.
Yeah. This totally makes sense for like, if this is leading more into like the teen drama.
Or if this happened in like year 5.
Yeah.
And as Draco runs past, he says, "I'm gonna get that jumped up mudblood."
Jumped up.
And I just, that's a weird turn of phrase.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. God, it's still so satisfying though. Like he, in the first pass through this loop, when she pulls the wand on him and he like cowers and then she turns and punches him in the face instead. It's just,
Yeah, it's so
This
satisfying.
is Hermione growing up in a Muggle household.
Yeah.
She knows how to throw punches.
Yeah, her dentists live in the south side of London or something like that.
Yeah.
The bad part of London.
She's scrappy.
Yeah. And then they head out to Hagrid's hut and see that Buckbeak is still alive. And so this is where Hermione, mentions that Dumbledore's line of more than one innocent life will be spared.
Yeah.
And I think it completely makes sense that Hermione is the one that understands the plan before Harry does.
Yeah.
And she's the one that points out that they have to wait to save Buckbeak until after Fudge sees him outside.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, because if Buckbeak's not there when he shows up, then he's going to question like Hagrid.
Mm-hmm.
But nah, they need to give him an alibi.
And then we do get into one of my gripes about this moment, because I kind of hate this plot-based explanation whenever Harry is ready to just run into the hut and explain everything.
Uh-huh.
And Hermione says, "If you go bursting in there, Hagrid will think you've gone mad." And my first thought is, why would Hagrid think that he's gone mad seeing two Harrys?
I interpreted this as like, sorry, I'm gonna find this like line again, because I always interpreted that like that if Harry had gone in there, that Harry himself, like this past Harry, will think that he's gone mad. He's seeing himself show up through the door. Like, because doesn't she also go on that, like, maybe this is the thing that's in the book, but it comes up that, like, time travel is particularly dangerous for wizards because if you meet yourself in time, like, you're messing with the timeline, and that it causes that, like, terrible things happen to people who mess with time or something to that effect.
Yeah, she mentions that, bad things happen to wizards that mess with time. I think that's pretty close to the line.
Yeah, she says, oh, okay. I guess it is. It's very vague because she says to him like that you're in Hagrid's hut right now, and if you go bursting in, he'll think you've gone mad. And I always assumed that the heel she's talking about is him, Harry, not Hagrid. But it could be either one of them. Yeah,
I always assumed that she was talking about Hagrid, especially like him going in there talking about Peter Pettigrew and
all of them would have like a very awkward time of it if a second Harry just burst through the door.
But at the same time, I would think that their first thought would be that it's magic. Either polyjuice potion or time travel, because I would think that they would, even though time travel magic is rare, I think that it's something that other wizards would know about. Yeah. I almost would prefer a different explanation along the lines of, going along with the single timeline. It's like, do you remember yourself bursting through the door? Of course not, which means that it can't happen.
Mm-hmm. It would be interesting, like, they're not trying to fulfill the things they saw happen. It just so happens to coincide that way, right? Mm-hmm. Like, when we get a little further into this, like, Hermione picks up like that little rock and throws it and hits Harry in the back of the head. Yeah. And then our Harry touches the back of his head. Like, that hurt.
I love that. That is my next note is I love that visual representation of Hermione's thought process.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Because Hermione's there saying, we aren't leaving. Why aren't we leaving? And then we see there's this unusual rock that I remember bursting through a vase. That means that I must have thrown it. And so she throws it.
Shatters the vase, and then she throws the second one.
And then, again, I think it's interesting their two personalities, because this is immediately, Harry turns it back on her, asking if she's gone mad, throwing the rocks into them.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you mentioned, Hermione throws a rock and hits Harry in the head, and he immediately like rubs his head in remembered pain.
Yeah.
And then and we get Hermione apologizing for it.
Yeah, no, I do really love this this whole bit. Like I'm fascinated with the way that time travel works, because there are so many stories that have time loops or time travel or whatever that is about like going and changing what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And Prisoner of Azkaban is about fulfilling what has already occurred. Not intentionally, right? Like they don't seem to be deliberately trying to like step in these shoes. They just coincidentally are doing the things that they always were going to.
Yeah, even though we do find out eventually, and we get a little bit of this here coming up with the fact that Dumbledore basically orchestrated this entire thing, and like Dumbledore had this master plan of this time loop,
Yeah.
because he, even the first time around, he knows he knows the full extent of what's happening.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's interesting because like I have to wonder, like Dumbledore knows that he's going to send them back. Like he's already made the decision. He knows that Hermione has the time turner. He like deliberately stalls them at the door so the kids can get out before Fudge and the Executioner go in. Like I'm just
Yeah,
Dumbledore is like too powerful sometimes.
yes, it's like he is omniscient almost.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Because he like literally knows everything that's going on, and that is simultaneously great to watch as it comes out, and especially the way that they play him. I think both of them to a certain extent. I think Gambon, I think he brings a little bit more mischievousness to it.
Oh, totally. He's got a bit of like a Santa Claus vibe, in my opinion. I've always kind of read him as like jovial in a way that I don't think Harris brings in the same way.
Yeah, I think Harris, he's I can't think of how to describe it. Like there is that like it's still that bit of joy behind it, but it's a much more reserved joy. Like it doesn't
There's
seem...
like a weight upon him, I think.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know if it's just because the films are also moving into this darker tone, but it really feels like he's carrying something. That like that smile, that sort of jolly nature when it does come through is more of a band-aid than like his actual nature.
Yeah, and Gambon feels like this is him all the time. He's just always doing this stuff with this air of jovialness and this, smug self-satisfaction.
I think about like his sweet tooth in the books, how he's like always got candy, that the passwords to his room are always candy. There's like a playfulness, like he never really grew up. Reminds me a little bit more of like Merlin from Sword in the Stone almost.
Yeah. And then the next part is another line that I'm not all that fond of whenever Hermione says, "Is that really what my hair looks like from the back?" That just seems like such an odd thing to point out. And especially because, it's not like her hair looks bad from the back. It just looks completely normal.
Mm-hmm. It's just like being outside yourself, Like...
Yeah. It's kind of like... it reminds me, there is this mirror where you can actually see like a true representation of yourself. Like you can see yourself the way others see you, where it's like reverse from typical mirrors.
Yeah.
Because whenever you're looking in a mirror, you're always seeing a mirrored version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But they have
the way
mirrors.
that we perceive ourselves.
Yeah.
Is like the opposite from how other people would view us.
Right. And this is like, seeing the non-mirrored version of yourself. And I want to ask you, because I brought this theory up last time. Whenever past Hermione sees present Hermione, she plays it off to everyone else. But I think that she recognizes herself. Recognizes that that's
certainly
her. And she plays it off because she knows that no one else is supposed to know about the time turner. And... so she knows just to let it go, and then, her future self will work it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so curious as to like whether or not she's like had experiences like this throughout the year. Like, because on the one hand, she's supposed to be using this just to like take these extra classes, but there probably is a lot of like dodging yourself or your friends who just saw you 30 seconds ago, or like things like that. God, the awareness of like there's a future version of me that's also here right now is so like twisty in a way that I find really interesting. Like her perception of time must be really I don't want to say skewed, but like I don't know. There is that sense of like she caught a glimpse of herself, so she knows that there's going to be something that's going to bring her back, but she can't worry about it right now.
Right, because she knows that, future her will have to figure all that out.
Yeah, if past her decides right now to like walk into the woods and confront herself, like that's just gonna cause even more problem.
And I think like future or present her at this point, she would know. Like I think she has at least a somewhat decent memory of the way things happen. So she, if past Hermione had come into the woods, like present Hermione would remember that and would avoid her.
Yeah.
And you brought up the fact that like in the past, in earlier parts of the movie, there are moments where it's like the other characters react to her appearing out of nowhere. I almost wonder if that's like, if by this point in time she's grown bold enough that she does just like use the time turner out in the open, and these are moments where she like used the time turner, and that's like where she went back in time or came back from being back in time.
Yeah.
Because, she does use it like right in front of Ron, and then as, we'll get to it, we won't, I actually was planning on stopping right before Ron's reaction, but I think, like Ron's reaction makes it seem like she could do this in front of people and they wouldn't.
They just wouldn't.
Yeah.
As long as you're back in the position you started in, there is no forward time travel, as far as I'm aware. I think maybe Cursed Child did something that Cursed Child's time travel doesn't work at all like this time travel works. So I don't want to like use that as like a touchstone, but my understanding from this book and from this sequence in particular is that like you can travel back in time, but then you just have to make that time up to get back to the point you traveled back from. It does not feel to me that like she's like finishing a class and then jumping back forward. Like there's always only one Hermione because the one that goes back in time remains back in time, right? Like when they get back to the hospital room later, they don't enter the room until after they've left it, right? After the time travel has begun. So there's always that remove from self in the end point. There's only in situations like this where you can have two of the same person in the same place, and they still should not meet each other.
Right. And then, after the hair comment, we do get this almost sitcom-esque moment of them, trying to lure Buckbeak out into the forest. And we get some of Dumbledore and Fudge's conversation, which a lot of it is hard to hear, but I do appreciate that they have a lot of it in the subtitles.
Yeah.
And it's basically just repeated stalling tactics by Dumbledore. Him asking Fudge several times to pardon Buckbeak, and Fudge mentions the fact that the executioner there is just following the orders of the committee.
Yeah.
And then Dumbledore, talks, points out to look at the strawberry fields, and Fudge is like, I don't see any strawberries.
Oh, it's very good. I also just really I just love Buckbeak so much, because we know that it's like, that hippogriffs are these like really proud, kind of almost regal creatures, and then when Harry goes and like tries to get him up, he just like lays there like a dog that doesn't want to go on a walk. Like,
yeah, I think it fits because it's like, it has elements of like a cat or a dog, but or like almost like a tiger, because it is something that is
so big and it can definitely hurt you.
Yes. But at the same time, as long as you're treating it with respect, then it's gentle towards humans. Even though it's big enough to eat, like six full-grown ferrets and 2 bats.
The way that everyone comes out of the hut and Dumbledore distracts them. I know we just bred from the strawberry fields, but like having the kids and Buckbeak still just standing there in the middle of the garden is so bold.
Yes, and then once they get out, I have to mention I so much love the smugness and the self-satisfaction of Dumbledore in this moment where he's like, well, what are we going to do? Search the skies? I think I'm just going to go in and have a cup of tea or brandy.
Yeah, or a large brandy.
And Hagrid's response is, you'll find no small cups in this house. And, we haven't talked about it yet, but I do have to bring up, I think this is the right time here since we mentioned Hagrid. But as of this recording, just 2 days previously, Robbie Coltrane passed away.
That's so sad.
Yeah. And
he was, 67?
72.
72. Oh, he's older than I thought.
Yeah.
Wow. Gosh, it's a tragedy, honestly. I saw that quote that was going around from him in an interview a few years back talking about you could be watching this in 50 years' time easy.
Yeah,
and,
that was from the reunion
here,
special
but
on HBO Max.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's just so touching,
Yeah, and just all the stories about him with the kids are just so heartwarming. You couldn't ask for a better person to play Hagrid.
Yeah, he really embodied the character in a way that felt really natural, right? There are so many behind the scenes clips of the kids and him, and it's just really sweet.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it.
Yeah, and I love Hagrid throughout all the movies. I think my only complaint is they silly him up a little bit too much here and there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But I think overall, it's so great. And one of the, I see a lot of memes on Facebook, and I think one of my favorite ones is recalling the ending of Deathly Hallows with Harry taking his kids to the train, and and they mention a better line. I named him after the bravest person that I've ever known. Rubius Hagrid Potter.
Hell yeah! Seriously though, Hagrid deserves more recognition. If you're gonna name your kids after all the people you know, how do you leave out Hagrid like that?
Yeah.
Man, rescued you from the Dursleys and personally brought you to the school the first time.
Mm-hmm. And then, jumping back to something a little silly, which I think this works.
Uh-huh.
Did you notice the fact that the entire time, after Dumbledore leaves, there's a crow perched on Fudge's hat? Yeah,
yes. It lands on his hat, as he's going inside, as Dumbledore's going back inside, and it just remains there, and it delights me.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect level of silliness. And and again, it's something that they probably couldn't have planned any better.
Yeah, seriously. I am so curious. So going on the line of the timeline being fixed.
Mm-hmm.
We know that the trio in the past are up on the hill, overlooking this presumed beheading that is happening.
Yeah.
And the shot in the film, when we watch it through the first time, is very deliberately framed so that we can't see Buckbeak. But I always assumed that the boys could. But they must not, because Buckbeak never got beheaded.
Right.
The axe falling is cutting a pumpkin. out of frustration, I guess.
Yeah, which again, I talked about it in the last episode, that like the way that it's framed and the way that it's done, like the first time you see it, it does not look like he's cutting a pumpkin out of frustration.
No.
It looks like, he's very deliberately pausing and doing this, like it's setting up the the gravitas of this situation.
Yeah.
And then I do think that they're far enough away and there is enough pumpkins and,
These
the
pumpkins
pumpkin
are
patch.
enormous.
Yeah. I think that you could argue that they would not have been able to see Buckbeak from that vantage point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's my assumption as well. Because otherwise it doesn't, I don't think it works in the way that the rest of this is so tight as far as like what happens in their little time loop.
And then I think it's an interesting choice right here to have this quiet moment at this point in the film.
Mm-hmm.
With them just saying, now we wait. And we know as a viewer that this intense scene is going on inside the Shrieking Shack.
Yeah.
But this version of Harry and Hermione aren't a part of it, so they're just sitting down and waiting, and they're having this conversation about the person that saved Harry and Sirius from the Dementors.
Mm-hmm.
And I like how simultaneously confident that Harry saw his dad, even though he knows logically that it could not have been his dad.
Yeah.
And
yeah, no, it's really interesting that like Hermione doesn't put together here that like, I guess in like she recognized herself earlier, right? Like, but Harry is unfamiliar with this, like hasn't experienced this before, like doesn't have the contextualization when it happened that like, oh, that's me, until he's like standing in that position. We'll like get there, but
yeah. And I do think it's a little silly and sad at the same time, but also a reminder that Harry is still a child. Like he is 14 at this point.
Something like that?
13.
13?
Yeah, he's 13 this year. And, just the fact that Harry is still a child, basically, as he's talking about him and Sirius getting a house in the country where they could both live together. Because that is a very childish line of thought.
Yeah, because there is no, like, he's still an escaped convict. Regardless of whether it's deserved
from their
or
point of view,
justified or not.
they think, from their line of thought, like, we know what's going to happen. But I think from their line of thought, they're going to rescue him and they're going to capture
Clear his
Wormtail
name.
and clear his name. And then
They
it's
also, the thing about this movie, we mentioned earlier about like how for people who read the books, it's like not one of their favorite movies, but like for people who've only seen, the thing that really like always hurts me about this movie is that they don't spend enough time talking about like the Marauders as a group, because that book is really about like that generation, and I don't think it even comes up in the movie that 3 of the 4 Marauders are here and the 4th is Harry's dad. Like, it just doesn't come up. Their names are on the map and everything. But, like, we don't ever get them referring to each other. Like, at least Remus and Sirius, like, using their nicknames with each other, like, just doesn't happen. They don't ever call Peter Pettigrew Wormtail, I think, in this movie.
No.
And so, like, the prevalence of his dad's story and like the people who were around his father in his life, have all been popping up in the course of Harry's year here. And it sort of makes sense that he would jump to the conclusion that like, oh, well, the other 3 are here. Like, that's my dad. And, like I remember the first time I read that book being thoroughly convinced that like, maybe there is something going on here.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I could see that.
Marauders make me sad.
Yeah, it is a little disappointing that we don't get a lot of the Marauders, and most of that is exclusive to the books, and like, we get touches of it, I think especially in like Order of the Phoenix, but most of it happens kind of between the scenes.
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, like, adaptation's always hard. There's always stuff that's going to get cut. when you're taking a big work like a novel and committing it to film. But I feel like there's a thing that happens a lot in this series in particular of like, oh, we forgot to mention, but we need this to be here now. Like, there's the shard of mirror that Harry's carrying in Deathly Hallows. No explanation where that mirror came from or its significance because they didn't write it into Order of the Phoenix. It just didn't come up that there was this gift from Sirius that Harry never opened that would have allowed him to communicate with him. Could have saved his life if he had just opened that damn package. And like, it's just, like if you haven't read the books, that's just a drop in the bucket of like stuff that gets forgotten.
Yeah, which is something that the way I always approach book adaptations is, my point of view is that it's always best to go into the movie first and then the book later. Because 9 times out of 10, the book is better than the movie. But if the movie is good, then you are already going in with a positive, and then you read the book, and then you get...
It elevates that.
It's like you read the book for all the deleted scenes.
I completely agree with you. I used to very much be the like, no, I want to read the thing before I watch it, but that always leads to disappointment, like no matter what. Even if it's a good adaptation, they're still going to be like, oh, but they didn't do this thing that I like, or whatever. But I've definitely learned that, like, yeah, doing it the other way around, like watching the movie or like whatever, and then going and consuming the book, like you said, you're getting all this extra exposition and stuff that doesn't get contextualized all the time on film.
And then back to the scene, we get another moment of Hermione acting from memory rather than from common sense, as she does the howl that they remember here.
Oh my God. Yes. It's so funny to me because she does the howl and Harry's like, what are you doing? And he's like, she's like rescuing you.
Yeah, I'm saving your life.
Now he's coming for us, Hermione.
Well, at first she's like, I'm saving your life. And then he says, thanks. And then he's like, oh, but now he's coming for us. And then Hermione's like, oh, I didn't think about that.
It's so funny.
And then we have this great, I love the visual craft of this werewolf chase scene.
Yeah.
Especially like this moment, which is something that's like very familiar, as the two of them hide behind this giant tree trunk. And then the camera makes the tree slowly take up the entire frame, like visually cutting off the werewolf, like on the side. And then once the werewolf is fully cut off, we hear the howl fade off into the distance as Harry and Hermione like continue to back up, going around the tree. And I also appreciate the fact that it doesn't go the full-on trope where, like, if this was the trope, they would turn around and Lupin would be like right there staring them in the face.
Absolutely.
But instead, it's like more of a wide shot, and he has doubled back, but he's still a little ways away. Like he can visually see them, but he's not right up on them.
Yeah, this it reminds me of you mentioned the sort of tropey version of this. It definitely makes me think of the there's the sequence in Fellowship of the Ring when they're in Moria and they're fighting the cave troll, and like this exact same thing happens with Frodo where he's like backing around behind the pillar and he turns around and oh no, it's right there on the other side of the pillar. This werewolf design has grown on me so much since this movie came out, because I'm so glad that he doesn't look like a traditional, like, I don't know, just like big furry, like man wolf. Like there's still a lot of like the humanoid aspect of him in there. He's not like big and furry. It's like very sleek. The elongated limbs, I don't know. I really dig it, actually.
I don't know. I'm mixed on it. Like, I haven't given it a ton of thought. I do think that it is important for them to differentiate the werewolf version versus the Animagus version. And not make him look like just, basically like Sirius Black, but, just twice the size, like a typical wolf. But I do think it's good that they went with the more, like the more cinematic werewolf, like, American Werewolf in London. those
He
type
also
of things.
doesn't necessarily have like the Wolfman kind of. Like I imagine, like most of the time you see like werewolves in media, I feel like they're like big and stocky, like they're broad-shouldered, they're like big barrel-chested, like, and Lupin is not that because this is a sickness,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he still has that like kind of thin, weathered, sickly look to him almost.
Yeah, and I guess I think like they don't explain it, but I can kind of see the reasoning behind making him look more thin and sickly because because he is someone that represses his werewolf side so that as a werewolf he doesn't like hunt and
Yeah.
feed. He just so you could think of like I don't remember how Fenrir Greyback looks in the movie. It's been too long since I've
It's
seen the
really
later
interesting
movies.
because they talk about in the books how Fenrir Greyback is like, even when he's not in his werewolf form, is always like still is a
Animalistic.
predator, is still cannibalistic, is still like attacking children and stuff. And so his human form has taken on a lot of wolf-like aspects. So he's always got like the extra facial hair and like the big jaws, like very interesting in how different the two of them are as far as like design.
Yeah, although I can't remember like if Fenrir Greyback's werewolf form is, more beefier and muscular and it's like a healthy werewolf, where
Yeah.
this is like a sickly
Gosh, I
werewolf.
don't remember either.
Because I think
He's present
that,
at the battle in Hogwarts. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's a full moon, if he's in
Werewolf
werewolf shape
form.
in there or not.
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't even remember if we do ever see his werewolf form. I
don't
would
think
think
we
that we
do.
do.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I don't think so.
But I would think that if you did follow this train of thought and we did see Fenrir Greyback's version, his werewolf would be muscular and more
Oh, I think so too.
like the cinematic because it's like he's a healthy he's
He's-
a healthy werewolf where
Yeah.
Lupin is a sickly werewolf.
Hmm. He's fighting it, whereas Fenrir is not.
And then we get this triumphant rescue by Buckbeak, and this is a great scene.
It's so good.
It's so brief and so quick, but it's just great. And I think it's very economical that Harry has this quick line to remind the audience that the werewolf is still just Lupin and that we should feel sorry for him. He says, this is a bad day for Professor Lupin.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rough. I love Lupin so much. Like, seeing him like this is really sad.
Yeah, even though, you would think that he would be, at this point in time, he's been dealing with this werewolfism, his lycanthropy his entire life, and he still doesn't have a handle on it.
Yeah, it's rough.
Even in a situation where it's like, this is like the absolute best circumstances for him.
Mm-hmm.
And still it's not enough. Like he's still accidentally turning into a werewolf because he forgot his potion.
It sucks. Just wrapped up in this other thing that's going on, right? Like Harry had given him the map to prove to him that Pettigrew is still alive, and suddenly it changes the entire interaction that he's going to have with Sirius Black. Like, he's one of the Marauders. He knows all the secret passages. Like, the Tree and Shack is where they hung out. Like,
and at this point in time, he has the Marauders rap.
Yeah.
And then after this, we get the moment with the Dementors, and like you said, this is the moment where Harry finally realizes that no, that wasn't his father, that was him. And watching it closely again, I'm kind of torn because you don't see the full-bodied stag Patronus, but there are a couple flashes of the stag's head right in the middle of the glowy Patronus shield.
Mm-hmm. It's again like just so interesting to me because I wonder how many of the choices that Harry and Hermione make like in this loop are predicated on like things they remember happening before, and how many of them are just like driven by like who these people are, like their nature, right? Like Hermione quick thinking, howling to get Lupin away from the trio of them earlier without regarding that, like, oh, that means he's going to come for me. And then Harry stepping up and performing the spell, like, we hear him say later that he knew he could do it because he had already done it. But also, like, Harry is the, like, I'm going to jump in to protect people person. We've seen this time and time again from him already. And so it's a little bit of both of, like, he's driven by this, like, I need to do something motivation that outweighs his, like, I'm going to wait for my dad. And it's in the moment that he's casting it that he finally makes the connection, like, oh, I saw myself.
Yeah, and right after this, I love this moment with the two of them riding Buckbeak and the contrast on their two faces, because Harry's face is just like, he's just filled with this unbridled joy of the fact that he cast this incredibly powerful spell because he was
it all term.
Yeah, because, and also, like, it was so powerful because he was able to let go of all his doubts and all his and all this extra baggage in his head, because, as he said, he had already done it.
There's also a real, and maybe I'm just, like, reading into it too much because I'm on this, like, family thing for Harry right now, but, like, the reason that Harry had such a problem with the Dementors throughout the rest of this film was because they were reminding him of the loss of his family, right? Like, he hears his mom scream. He hears, like, he remembers the night that he lost his parents. And now, here, in this moment, he has found family again in his godfather, who is dying in front of him.
Yeah, and it is interesting that, like, the Dementors bring out the best and worst part of the memory of his parents, because he uses the best memory that he has of his parents, which, as he puts it, it's like a nothing memory. It's just them being together, and that's this memory that he uses of joy to cast the Patronus. But then whenever the Dementors kiss him, he gets the worst memory of his parents dying.
Yeah. And so it's this sort of, it's not even a true memory. It's more of an impression, more of a feeling.
Well, I mean, it could be true, but he can't prove that it's a true memory.
Yeah, right? He was an infant.
Yeah.
Oh, that poor kid. What a poor kid.
Because, I mean, people do have, like, it's rare, but some people do have, like, infant memories.
Oh, sure. But they're, like, it's not as easy to articulate or, like, hold on to, I think, as it is to be like, oh yeah, remember we were on the train last week?
Yeah, and then I do also want to mention, like, with the two of them on Buckbeak, Harry has this look of pure joy on his face, and Hermione has this look of just bewilderment and this just incredulous look on her face the entire time. Like, what just happened? And then, we get this little moment of her being afraid of flying as they dive to the jail cell rescue, which, like, just blows by super quick. And I do have some questions, like, why does Hogwarts have a tower jail cell?
I have no idea. Like, do you think that this is just like a makeshift room that they put him in, or is this like an actual, like, do they use this ever again? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, they have the dungeons.
It's definitely a jail cell. It has, like, bars on the door.
Yeah. Like, it makes me think of the dungeons, like, because that's where the Slytherin quarters are.
They have dungeons. Why is he in this rooftop?
But I'm pretty sure that the dungeons are, like, the lower section of the castle, and this is in one of the towers.
It's because Dumbledore knew that they would have to use Buckbeak to get him out of there.
Yeah, and again, you don't really see it very much, but you know that they are definitely fudging how all three of them can fit on Buckbeak's back. And plus, you have three people riding Buckbeak. And you have the wings, because, the wings get in the way of where your legs would be.
Yeah.
So that would make it difficult for all three of them to ride on his back.
They make it work.
Yeah.
They don't have to go very far. This is like when you're squeezing into a car with your friends. There's not enough seats. It's like, I'll just sit on someone's lap for a minute. Like, it'll be fine. We're just going around the corner.
And then we have this, quick moment with Sirius and Harry, and once again we get the whole dichotomy of, you look just like your father except for your eyes, which are not the right color.
Yeah.
And just has to be
I
pointed
like
out.
him completing it. He's heard it so many times
Mhm.
that he's the one who's like, but I've got my mother's eyes. Everyone tells me this.
Yeah, well, everyone close, which I think it's just really... Well, I don't know. I mean, I know he heard it this year from Lupin, and I would think... I'm sure Molly has said it. Molly Weasley has said it at some point.
I think it happens in the book a lot. Because there are a lot of people that knew Harry's parents. A lot of the same teachers are still teaching here.
Okay.
It's only been
like 10 years?
something like that.
Yeah, probably 10 years, because I think he looks
They
about
were
1 year old.
His parents, were very young. I think his mom was 22 when she died. So they had only been out of school for like 5 years.
Yeah.
Right? So it's been less than 20 since they left school. Now Harry's back.
And one of the teachers is a ghost.
Yeah, one of the...
Which we don't ever see.
Of Professor Binns. We don't ever see him, but I love the story of he died in his sleep one night and then
just
and
came
then,
back
got
to
up
teaching
and
the next day.
I love so we're about to get back to the hospital wing, and I love Dumbledore coming out and acting like he doesn't know what they're talking about, just being like, oh, good night.
Yeah. Yeah, Hermione's like, we did it, he's free. Who's free? Good night.
Good night.
And just that's it. And that's where we end this loop.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
no. I love this.
Yeah, this is, I'm one of those where I have read some of the books. I've listened to all the audiobooks, but I came to those after watching the movies. So This is, I think, my favorite movie, and I think it is mostly tied to this time loop portion. Just because I just love how this is done. It's just so great and so fun to watch.
I always forget how small of a part of the movie it actually is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's only like 20 minutes in a 2-hour movie.
Yeah, and yet it's like the critical moment of the film. Like, it ties together everything that we've kind of like left undone when we get to the hospital room the first time. Yeah.
So that wraps this up. Is there anything else that you want to say about this loop or the previous loop or this movie as a whole?
No, I really love this film a lot. These characters are ones that have like meant a lot to me for my whole life, and so like being able to just have the opportunity to like sit down and talk about Harry Potter again has been really great. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. I just really love doing these hiatus episodes. Like the last one that I did was on Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Oh, I love that movie too.
And I love the opportunity to do these little time loop moments. I'm sure. I'm pretty sure in the future I'll probably do Back to the Future at some point.
Yeah.
But I love just these little time
forgot
loop
that Scott
movements.
Pilgrim has a time loop in it, but it absolutely does.
Yeah.
I don't ever think about it that way, but it's so good.
But yeah, thanks for joining me. It was great to talk with you. And for everybody else that hasn't heard your other podcast, why don't you go ahead and take a moment to let everybody know where else they can hear you online?
Yeah, totally. So Harry Potter Minute is, like I said, the first 2 seasons are complete. I don't know if we're going to return to that, but that's on duelinggenre.com. Over there, I also did Ferris Bueller's Minute Off, which is like a tight 100 episodes, just about Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I love that movie a lot. If you want to subscribe to the Dueling Genre Patreon for $3 a month, I did Scott Pilgrim versus the Minute over there. And I'm currently doing New Republic Archives, which is a Star Wars show that I do with my friend Tim. We alternate between like news episodes and like deep dives into different bits of Star Wars, both canon and legends. We kind of spread it out all over the place because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. And I think that even if something is no longer quote unquote canon, doesn't mean that it can't be read or consumed or enjoyed. So that's, again, duelinggenre.com.
And as always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me at flightstitesandmovienights.com. You can follow me on Twitter, where I'm at Bubbawheat. You can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. We also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group. You can join that and discuss episodes as they come out, as well as have discussions on time loops in general. And I've also recently started a Movies by Minutes wiki. You can find that at moviesbyminutes.fandom.com. It's at this point it's relatively small, and as I'm just starting to build all the episode or all the podcasts and podcasters.
There's so many of them.
But if you'd like to be a part of that, you can add shows and podcasters yourself. And that will hopefully continue to grow and evolve as that goes on. But that's been an interesting project that I've recently started, and I hope that it continues to grow. And and next week starts my coverage of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, starting with Buffy's season 6 life serial. So until next time.
Soy Héctor 3.
Héctor 2.
Héctor 1. Soy Héctor 3.
Héctor 2.
Héctor 1. Soy Héctor 3.
Héctor 2.
Héctor 1. Soy Héctor 3.